Hello, YouTube. This is Dr. Paul Kerstetter. Today we're answering a big question. What was the worst quarterly GDP ever recorded in the United States? But before we dive into that, let's start with a quick refresher. What exactly is GDP? GDP, or Gross Domestic Product, is a measure of a country's economic health. It's the total value of all final goods and services produced within a country's borders in a given year. In 2023, the US GDP was $27.7 trillion, the largest in the world. Here's the basic GDP formula. GDP equals consumption plus investment plus government spending plus net exports. Or think of it this way, GDP is price times quantity summed across the entire economy. Sounds like a massive job, right? So who's responsible for calculating this number? In the US, it's the Bureau of Economic Analysis, a part of the Department of Commerce. They pull data from a variety of sources, including the Census Bureau, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the IRS, and the Federal Reserve. Let's break down the components of GDP. First, let's start with consumption. Consumer spending on final goods and services, like coffee, donuts, or an oil change. This is the largest part of GDP, making up more than half. Investment. This is spending by businesses on equipment, land, or buildings. Home purchases by individuals also count as investment. Government spending. This is federal, state, and local spending on things like roads, schools, and defense. Roughly 38% of GDP comes from this category. Finally, net exports. This is exports minus imports. If imports exceed exports, this number is negative. For example, in quarter 1 of 2025, the US GDP was minus 0.3%, down from 2.4% in quarter 4 of 2024. But why the drop? Primarily because net exports came in at a steep minus 5.03%. So what happened? Many businesses anticipated tariffs from a potential second Trump administration and boosted inventories before the tariffs took effect, temporarily inflating imports and dragging down the GDP. There are two ways to look at GDP. Nominal GDP uses current prices. Real GDP adjusts for inflation, giving a more accurate view of economic growth over time. GDP is reported quarterly, and economists watch it closely to determine if the economy is growing, which means more goods and services, more jobs, or contracting, less production, or a potential recession. A recession is commonly defined as 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth. We can also look at GDP per capita, that is GDP divided by the population. For example, China has a GDP of $17.8 trillion, or $12,600 per person. Germany, on the other hand, has a smaller GDP of $4.5 trillion, or $54,600 per person, which is larger per person. So even though China's total GDP is larger, Germany's economy is more productive per person. And now, to answer our main question, what was the worst quarterly GDP ever recorded in US history? It is minus 32.9%. Ouch! It happened in quarter 2 of 2020 during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. Businesses shut down, travel stopped, and the US entered a deep recession, ending the longest economic expansion in US history. In just a few months, 5 years of economic gains were wiped out. For comparison, the annual GDP in 2020 was minus 2.21%, and the annual GDP in 2008 recession was minus 2.58%. That's all for today. I hope you enjoyed this breakdown of GDP and its most dramatic drop in US history. If you found this helpful, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. Stay safe, and I hope to see you in the next video.